Hi again, AP Statistics students. I'm back with a video about how to enter data and manipulate data on your Texas Instruments TI-89 calculator. So I've already done videos for the 84 and the Inspire. Hopefully you didn't watch those, because if you have a TI-89, this is the video for you. So I'm going to show you how to enter data into the stats list editor software, how to make the graph of a histogram, as well as how to do some of the basic statistics calculations that you need to do for this week's stuff. So go ahead and grab your TI-89 calculator. I'm going to switch over to my document camera here, and I'm going to put up a data set and in a little bit. And so feel free to pause when we get to that, because I'm only going to put up there for just a couple seconds. You'll need more than that to enter all the data. So you'll just pause the video when we get to that spot, and then we'll pick it up and we'll finish up together. So let me switch over to my document camera, and we'll get started with the TI-89. All right, guys, so here we are. We've got my TI-89 titanium graphing calculator here. And as you can see, I'm just kind of sitting here on the home screen at the moment doing some stuff that I was working on earlier. And a couple of features I wanted to point out on this calculator. Across the top, you'll see that there are function commands, F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, and F6 up at the top of the screen up here. We will be using those quite a bit. They correspond to function buttons that are in the first row of keys down below here, right down here. If those buttons are important, especially when we get into the stats program, you only have F1 through F5 as keys, but notice in blue it says F6, F7, F8. So that's how we will access those other buttons when we get there. All right, so we're going to go to your apps menu. So you might notice just in the third row down of keys, I'm going to slide the calculator just a little bit. There's a button that says apps, and so go ahead and press that. I can't put the buttons on the screen at the same time. The screen gets too small, but I'll press that. And you get something that looks similar to this. Yeah, the date's set a little wonky. I know it's not July 1st, 1997, and it's not 11:45 p.m. right now. It's 3:25 p.m. on a Wednesday. We're going to scroll down here to a piece of software called the Stats List Editor. As one of our students found out earlier, she didn't have that installed on her TI-89 calculator. This is a really important piece of software for the TI-89. If you don't have it, you need to figure out how to get it. My suggestion to you is contact me right away, and we'll set up a time when I can meet you at school. It takes about, I don't know, 30 seconds to transfer it if we're face-to-face, because we can plug our calculators into each other using a cable. But it's a really complicated process to get it to your calculator from your computer. So I would suggest setting a time to come in and meet with me so that we can get this transferred over to your calculator. I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter button. Now, when you do that, you might get a dialog window that asks you what folder to use. You have the options of main or stat vars. You'll notice on the bottom left of my screen, it says stat vars. That's because I selected the stat vars folder when I launched this earlier today. And you'll want to do the same thing. If you didn't do it this time, that's okay. Next time when you turn your calculator off, when you turn it back on, you'll get the option to choose stat vars at that point. The main screen for your statistics program here is where we have lists. Lists 1, 2, 3, 4 are visible. 5 and 6 are off to the right. And then there's even a blank list. Oh, mine's actually got some calculations that already happened in here. You won't have that residuals list, and that's okay. We'll talk more about that later. You probably have a blank one over there, because you can have as many lists as you want. You just have to give them names. But it comes by default with lists 1 through 6. So we're going to enter some data here, and the data we're going to enter are the percentage of foreign-born residents for each of the 50 United States. So when you see the data pop up here, go ahead and push pause, because it's only going to be up for a couple of seconds. And then when we come back, we'll have all the data entered to the calculator, and we'll begin from there. So go ahead and when you see the data, press pause, and then we'll get back to action here. All right, guys, hopefully you got all your data entered in here. It should look something like mine here down at the bottom of the screen. And this is now list 1 for the rest of the time here will be saved with this data in it. It saves automatically as we're going along. So what I'm going to show you next is how to plot this data in a histogram on the TI-89 calculator. So earlier I mentioned the function keys, and now here's where they come into play. You'll notice up at the top here, F2 is where we can define our stat plots. So I'm going to push F2. And then there's a couple of keystrokes to get into it here. I've got to go to plot setup, which is choice number 1. And then you can see I have a few of them that are already set from earlier. So I'm going to clear those off just so it looks like yours. There we go. And so I'm going to go into plot number 1. And you can see at the top here, it says F1 allows me to define this plot. So that's what I'm going to do. F2, plot setup, F1, define. Now, this little dialog box that opens up allows me to choose lots of different things. You can see that I've got scatter plot selected right now. That's the default. But I want to make a histogram. So I'm going to come down here to histogram. And what this will do, it'll allow me to only enter one variable. So it kind of grayed out the Y variable here. So if I push down arrow, it just goes straight down to X. And this is where we want to enter list 1. You actually have to type the whole thing out. It's kind of annoying on this calculator, but that's how it works. So LIST1. Oops. There we go. LIST. And then the number. Oh, why did I type a D? I don't know. Let me go back and put in an I right there. I don't know why. There we go. LIST1. All right. Now, we're going to leave it all alone, the rest of this alone for right now. And we'll come back here in a second to talk about what we might want to change. So you don't need to edit anything else. Just go ahead and hit enter. And on this screen, what you should see is a little mini picture of a histogram. Should say X in list 1, that's where it is. And it says B1, that's the bucket width for this data set. Now, the cool thing about the 89 is right here, you see F5 is zoom data. So I can hit that button, it'll take me right to the graph screen and automatically zoom the calculator to fit the data. And there's what it looks like. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I've got another graph going at the same time. I forgot to turn that off. Hang on just one second while I go and turn that off. I don't want that on there. That's just going to confuse things. So I have to go in here and just clear that off real quick. Okay, sorry guys. That's what happens when I use my calculator for more than one subject. All right, so as you can see right here, this has way too many bars to it. Earlier in the video before I said, hey, usually I tell my students somewhere between 5 and 9, maybe 11 bars. Certainly not the 22 bars that this thing is trying to display. So here's what we have to do. We have to manipulate the bucket width. So do you remember when we were in the program earlier? And I said, hey, let's not worry about bucket width. Let's go back to the stats program. And I'm going to go back to my plots, F2. I'm going to go to plot setup. And I'm going to go back into my plot number 1 and go F1 to define that. And here's what I want to do. I want to change the bucket width. Okay, 1% wide was just way too many bars. So let's try putting it into a bucket width of 5. And let's see what that looks like when I go to the data. So F5, zoom data. And oh, well, it looks pretty good in terms of the x-axis, but as you can see, my bars have been kind of chopped off there at the top. So I'm going to have to adjust the window setting here. For some reason, the 89 does a great job of getting the width of the graph correct, but it doesn't do a very good job of getting the height correct. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my window settings, which you can see is in green on the F2 key. And my my Y max is set to 10, and my Y min is set to -10. I don't have a negative frequency, so I'm going to make that 0, and I'm going to make my upper 20. And let's see if we can't see the top of those bars now. So let's go back to our graph, and yes, we can see the top of that bar right there. So now we get a nice picture of what our histogram is supposed to look like. With just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classes, which is much better than the 21 classes we had before. So there you go. That's how you make a histogram on the TI-89 calculator and how you can adjust the width of the classes so that you get the proper number of bars displayed. Um, what I want to show you next is how we do some of the basic stat calculations. Measures of center and spread are important. We just got done with a video on that for later this week. So I'm going to go back to the stats program. And oops, I'm sorry, hit the wrong thing there. Go to the stats program. There we go. And all my data in list one, what I'd like to do is find the mean, the median, and also some kind of measure of spread. Again, that's where these function commands across the top are going to come in handy. You see right here, F4 is where we go to calculate some things. So I'll go to F4. And since I only have one variable, I'm going to go to what's called one variable statistics. And then I have to tell it what list. And so I want list 1, not list 5. I guess I use this for list 5 at some point. I don't need to worry about anything else. Just enter list 1, hit enter, and look what we get. We get X bar, which as you learned is the symbol for mean. You get SX, which as you learned is the symbol for standard deviation. And if you keep going down, you'll see that you get a min, a Q1, keep scrolling down. You get the median, you get Q3, and you get the max. There's the 5-number summary that we talked about in the video for Thursday or Friday, depending on which period you're in. So that was on your data and measures of center and spread. And that's how you get that information. I do want to add that this calculator is capable of making the box and whisker plot for you. So if I go back to my plots, and I go into my plot setup, in plot number 1, I'm going to go back to define that. If you switch from histogram, you actually have 2 box plots. You have the box plot and you have the modified or modern box plot. Do the modern one. Trust me on this, okay? Because it will, when you go to zoom data, it will highlight if there's any outliers in the data set. Now, how do I know that's an outlier out there? Well, you can see it's not connected to the whisker. Okay, there's a box all by itself out there indicating that that high data point is actually an outlier. How did they know it was an outlier? Well, those are some formulas that we're going to get to in class on Thursday or Friday when I see you. But they're a mathematician named Tukey's equations, and I'll show you what his equations look like and how they help us determine whether or not we have an outlier in the data set. So wanted to show you all those things for your TI-89 graphing calculator. So hopefully you're able to follow along. And if you have questions or are having trouble with that, let me know in class on Thursday or Friday, depending on when I see you. And if you don't have that stats software, definitely get a hold of me because we need to get that installed on your calculator. All right, guys, thanks so much. And I will see you guys in class this week and look forward to working with you a little bit more on your graphing calculator. All right, have a great day.